Hi, thank you guys so much for joining us and hanging out with us here in the Recovery to Practice community. We are so grateful for your membership here. And do let us know if you're tuning in or you're catching us on that replay. We would love to say hi to you. We have a special guest with us here today. This is Kelly Sevin, and I'm going to have her introduce herself, tell you a little bit about who she is and where she's coming in from. I'm Carrie Breedlove. I'm the current program coordinator for Recovery to Practice, as you know. And we are housed at the University of North Texas, and we are also currently funded by the Addiction Technology Transfer Center out of Austin. And so we're so grateful for their support, and we're in the process of renewing that contract with them right now. So that's exciting. So we can continue doing these kind of live interviews and sharing important information. And our topic today is shame resilience, and how do we change the stories that we speak over ourselves as so many times? And I couldn't think of anyone better than Kelly to speak about this because, as she says in her own words, she geeks out over it. And that just means she's passionate about it. Hey guys, I see some people tuning in. We know Michelle was here earlier, stopping by and telling us she was excited about this topic and really loves just that phrase even, shame resilience. So Kelly, thank you so much for being here, and tell us a little bit about you and where you're coming in from.
Great. Thank you, Carrie. I'm so excited to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Sevin. I am the program director at Healing Springs Ranch in Tioga, Texas. We're a residential treatment facility for addictions, and we focus a lot on trauma. I also am just this semester, first semester, an adjunct professor at UNT, teaching an undergrad course in addictions there, which I geek out on Mondays as well with those students and getting to teach basically an overview of addictions. We talk about so much and hit the high points of many things to do with addictions and addiction treatment. So really, really great. I love the combination of both things that I get to do.
That's fantastic. And I heard that you had a little special guest in the background with you. Tell us who that is. Y'all take a look at this.
This is my personal dog. Her name's Andy. It's a female Andy. She is our therapy dog. Yeah, she's actually the therapist in training. I'm calling this her internship with us.
Yeah.
And she's exhausted right now. But yeah, so I bring her up every single day. Of course, it's for the clients, but it's really good for my soul too to have her here. And we were just talking, Carrie, before we went live, that it just changes the dynamics and the energy when a dog's there, and it helps clients feel a little bit more comfortable and a chance to connect with something else. Another living thing that's maybe not as threatening or perceived as threatening as a human being. So she's out here every day with me. Unfortunately, I don't get to take her to UNT. The students are all asking about her. Of course, I tell them about her, whether they really care or not. But yeah, so she's out here with me and my little guest for today.
Ah, that's so great. And let us know down there below if you have pets or if you've used pets, just even in the recovery work that you're doing, and what that experience has been like. I think that's wonderful to be able to incorporate animals and as companions, and it's just as part of that process and that journey. Like you said, having a third party. I know a lot of counselor friends of mine that do equine therapy and use horses. So, and I always say, I wish that I could have the cat that would do that. Yes. But we were talking about shame resiliency. So tell us a little bit about who has inspired you in this whole journey of understanding shame resiliency, and walk us through it.
Yeah, so Brene Brown, she is she calls herself a shame researcher, and she's been, I don't even know how many years now, over 15 years, researching shame and vulnerability and wholehearted living. And I came across her work for the first time probably 8 years ago. And her books and her 2 TED Talks that started her career changed my life personally and professionally. And I started incorporating her work 7-8 years ago with clients and working in addictions and eating disorders. And just over and over and over again, the clients were connecting with her work, and I was passionate about it. So I was bringing it into groups, and they were soaking it up. And even just seeing the number of views that she has on her first 2 TED Talks, to me, that just shows how hungry our culture is to really, really address this, or at least how many people can relate to shame. Unfortunately, we don't talk about it nearly enough, which is why shame has become so much more pervasive in our culture. So the idea of shame resilience in the dictionary resiliency is defined as the ability to go through some kind of change, either be broken or stretched or snapped or something, some kind of change, and be able to come back from it. But this is the part that I love the most, not just come back from it, but come back even stronger. And the idea of walking into whatever our shame is and our shame stories, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but being able to face that, whatever events or experiences or beliefs have given us a sense of shame, and whether it's from early childhood experiences or recent things, or the combination of, for most of us it is, a combination of years over years over years of things building up, but being able to walk into that and then change the story about it and not get stuck in those original beliefs.
Yeah. And that's kind of the idea, is that there is a progression. There's an awareness, but then there's a progression. We can be aware of something, but then what do we do with it from there? I think I meet with a lot of people in my own counseling practice. They're like, okay, now I know this, now what?
Right. And not to get stuck there and say, okay, so now I've realized this is what I think, this is what I believe about myself, but that's not going to get me where I want to go. This is just going to keep me stuck. And so that's the idea with resiliency. How do I learn about it, become aware of it, and then change it? And like the definition says, to come back even stronger.
Yes. And so how are you helping people to learn about it and become aware of it? What does that look like?
So the first thing, and Brene talks about this in her book, Rising Strong. I guess I should say Dr. Brown. She talks about it in her book, Rising Strong. The first thing is just to become aware of it, to notice that we have become emotionally hooked. Something is going on. And our emotions get the first crack at things. That's going to be the first response. And so for a lot of our clients that we work with, it's getting them to become aware of what their emotions even are. We do a lot of education and experiential therapies around it. And then once we notice, okay, something's going on, something's been stirred up inside of me, to get very, very specific about what the initial thoughts are that go through our mind. It usually takes a little bit of practice to really identify what those first thoughts are. But then if we can, and it's funny, in Brene Brown's book, she talks about if we can identify that first thought or the first few thoughts, it's usually not something we're proud of. It's usually not going to be something that we want to broadcast to people, because it's our shame that's kind of driving that initial story. And so if we can identify the story, figure out what it's about, why we're kind of jumping to these conclusions or assumptions, then we can figure out, okay, is it true? Is it not true? And some of the dangers, and this is one of my favorite things to talk to clients about, because we all do this. The danger is when something happens, our bodies have a reaction. We have some kind of emotional response. Our brains immediately go into telling a story to try to figure out, to try to make whatever is uncertain, certain. So I maybe don't know what I'm feeling, or I don't know what's happening, or I don't like what's happening. Our brains create a story to try to figure out what's safe, what's not safe. It's all out of self-protection, but we don't always slow down to actually check it out, analyze it, see if it's true, if it's not true. Neurologically, our brains actually chemically reward us for having that initial story. So even if it's so far from the truth, even if it's filled with shame, even if it doesn't actually serve us well and actually causes us more pain, we at least have a story. So our brain says, good job, you figured it out, even though we haven't actually seen if it's true or not true. You figured it out. Here's a chemical reward, and then our behavior then is driven by whatever that story is.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you are identifying it, but even if it is a lie potentially and not true, but because you have that reward, then it sounds like it's something that just sort of sticks.
Right. We're all that more likely just to believe it and run with it. And it's great. In Brene Brown's work, she talks about what a story is that's based on limited data. It's a conspiracy theory. So I might have certain pieces of a story, certain facts, things I've observed, not very factual, detailed things, but there's going to be gaps in between. And those gaps, that's where we get into trouble. That's where we are going to fill in the blanks in between with our shame, with our beliefs, with past experiences, and then act out of this conspiracy theory that we're believing.
And so what do you do next once you realize this is kind of the pattern that you're stuck in potentially?
So first find out what is it that I'm telling myself, and then check it out. Is this really true about this situation? And then one of the best lines, best sentences, and I've heard this in a couple of different places that talk about story, is to actually check it out with a person. If there's some kind of conflict in relationship, to go to them and say, okay, this is the story that I'm telling myself. And it's a way that's, coming from I statement. So it helps to not put the other person on defense, but just to actually say, okay, this is what I'm telling myself. Is any of this true? Whether it's a conflict with a partner, with a boss, a colleague, your kids, anybody, but to use that phrase, okay, this is the story I'm telling myself. Can you help me understand what's going on, or maybe where I have this wrong? It's usually a pretty disarming way to bring up a difficult conversation. And all of this, every single step of this, requires vulnerability. So these are tough conversations to have, and tough conversations even to have with ourselves, to identify what that story is that we're telling ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Would you say in this process, journaling, writing out some of those things is helpful?
Absolutely. So like I said, usually the first story or the first couple sentences that come to mind that sometimes take a little time to actually identify aren't our most proud thoughts. If we can write them down and even get more specific about what the assumption is of the situation, what the conclusion is that we're drawing, and then ultimately what's the belief, the very fundamental belief that we're telling ourselves, if we can zero in even more and journal that out and keep diving deeper into it, the journaling can help us do that. And also journaling does some really great things. It helps us process in two ways. One, it slows us down. So we actually have to think as slow as we write. And then also we're thinking it and organizing our thoughts to put it on paper, but then we're seeing the words on the paper too. So we're able to process it in two different ways. And sometimes that can help even call upon or highlight what the conspiracy theories are. We can start to see, okay, wait, this actually has nothing to do with this person, or very little to do with this situation. Or even what's so common is what's going on right now is emotionally charged from the past. That maybe I do feel very angry about what's happening, but it's so reminiscent of something else. I'm bringing the anger from the past into the current situation too.
I've heard some people talk about how they have a struggle to even connect with their emotions, based on past trauma and things like that. Any thoughts that you have on that piece as well?
A couple thoughts. One would be, first of all, just to check in with your body. Our bodies tell us so much about what we're feeling. All emotions are energy, so we feel them in our bodies. So if we can get familiar with how our body communicates anger or anxiety or fear or loneliness, sadness, where do we feel that in our bodies? That can help give us some direction onto identifying what our emotions are too.
Yeah. And just like you said before, that process of slowing things down, writing it down, being able to see patterns,
Right.
as you're journaling things out, that I'm sure could be super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Patterns are big on this. And so often the stories that we tell ourselves and the beliefs associated with it, there is going to be a very core pattern. Shame usually sends a few key messages for people: not good enough, who do you think you are, some things like that. And the not good enough can get really specific. It can be not blank enough. It could be not smart enough, not successful enough, not pretty enough, not something enough. And if we can get really specific with ourselves, it's I call them shame buttons, what our key shame buttons are. So then we can catch that in our stories and say, oh, okay, this is that shame button that was just activated. Let me step back for a minute, kind of figure out what's present, what's loaded from the past, and then help choose my next steps.
And so that being said, once you've realized it, you've acknowledged it, and maybe even you've been able to acknowledge it in the moment, how do you start changing that dialogue?
Well, I think that's just it. Actually have a dialogue. So often the stories we tell ourselves, it's just a monologue. It's just one voice talking. It's the shame tapes just playing on a constant loop. But if we can identify those loops that are going through our mind and then actually talk back to it, so align with kind of our healthy self and say, wait, hold on, that's the shame. What's true for me? What's really going on? What's the evidence against shame? I always say shame's the biggest liar. So let's find evidence against shame. affirmations, and also gratitude. Gratitude is a huge piece of it. So often when we're stuck in our stories, or we're overwhelmed with things, or shame is just so heavy, I think we forget how powerful gratitude can be. So really leaning into that can help shift some of that shame story too.
Yeah, absolutely. And let us know below if you've ever done gratitude related exercises, journaling type exercises. What has worked for you? What has worked for some of the people that you've worked with in recovery? We would love to hear that. The ideas that you have, let's share them there down below. I know, as you said earlier, vulnerability is a big piece of that. Inviting someone into this process, not just having a monologue, not just I'm talking to myself about the things that I'm struggling with, but I'm able to do this in community in a way. And so what do we say to people who are struggling with this idea of being vulnerable and feeling like, I don't know if I can do that?
That's a really great question. And so shame is a huge disconnecting factor. It disconnects us from ourselves, and it definitely disconnects us from other people. So I think journaling is a great first step, especially with the work within ourselves and shifting from monologue to dialogue. But then I think being able to share that shame with another safe human being, somebody else who has earned the right to be in that space with us, is so powerful. And by sharing, it's definitely a step of vulnerability, but that's also where we're going to get true connection. And so much of recovery, so much of life is about our need for healthy connection. So being able to share that with somebody else.
Right, exactly. And so moving people towards realizing that you can share, there are safe places and safe ways to go about doing that, and being able to open up in those safe places so that you can move forward, and being able to reframe that story, reframe the shame dialogue.
Right.
Yeah,
and it's another way to process it too, to be able to say it to somebody else and get their feedback back. And Brene Brown, she's also done a lot of research around empathy and the power of truly what empathy is, and that's a social construct. And actually, shame is a social construct. We learn about shame in a social setting, and we heal from shame in the same way. So, and vulnerability, we can practice some vulnerability with ourselves, but it really shows up when we engage with somebody else. It's, I think she defines it as the willingness to be seen, to truly be seen. And that's scary. That can be very scary. And so to take that risk and share with somebody else what your shame story is, or what your experiences are, and be open to them seeing you, and be open to their feedback, can be terrifying, and also incredibly healing and connecting.
Yeah, I've heard it talked about where guilt is I did something bad, shame is I am bad, and something intrinsic is wrong with me. My identity, is on the stand, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
That's the thing too with shame. It's crippling. It's debilitating. We get stuck in that. And if I'm stuck in this belief of I am bad, then there's nowhere to go. There's no hope in that. But if I can look at the guilt of, okay, I did something bad, that can help motivate me to not do that again. And there's also hope in that's not who I am. There's chance for change there, rather than shame. I'm stuck.
Right. How do we change the identity, that I've grown up with, or that has been spoken over me? Now, what would you say for someone that, they're realizing this process, they're understanding what their shame story has been, they're looking at ways to change that, but their shame story has been, they've been speaking it over themselves, or it was spoken over them for decades, and I could see someone, especially those of us maybe who are clinicians or even peers working with people in recovery, who are like, I feel like it just keeps coming back up, the shame story, like how do I get the new one and stick with it? What hope do we have there?
Well, it's definitely a process, and it's an ongoing process. I don't think we're ever going to be shameless people. I think that's always going to be something for every human being as we all continue on our journey towards greater health. That's going to be something that we have to face and wrestle with and kind of keep in check. So it's continued practice with it. Dive in deeper, and just keep relying on healthy people around us, having a healthy support group and connection to other people, and then really being careful being careful with the tapes that we play through our mind and engaging in that dialogue back.
Yeah, absolutely. And being aware, that awareness, that
Yeah.
mindfulness of what I'm saying, because sometimes it's like you go through life and you don't really even realize the tape and the music that's playing in the background because it's been there for so long that
Right.
it's just become part of the scenery. And you think that you aren't really paying attention to it, but it's having really deep rooted effects, in your life
Right.
and your way you're relating to other people, the way that you're connecting spiritually to yourself, to others, those kind of all the relationships, that we have.
Right. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard it said too, just kind of going back to something you said earlier about how shame is something for many people that, you were shamed maybe in front of others or something along those lines. There was others involved in you being shamed.
Yeah.
And so others need to be involved in you reversing the effects of that. And I think that goes to what you were talking about of just letting people bear witness to the story and to affirm that those were things that, were maybe the trauma, speaking of traumatic events and those kind of things. And there is value in that, even though maybe at the get-go, it doesn't feel like there is.
Right.
And where are we going here, Mm-hmm. Any other points that you wanted to bring out in this that you had for us?
Not necessarily. I mean, I could talk about this topic for hours and hours, but I do definitely recommend Brene Brown's books. I joke with the clients, I tell them all the time to read them, and I said I get no kickbacks. I just think they're phenomenal books. So Rising Strong and Daring Greatly are, I would say, my two favorites. They're all really good. And she had a Netflix special come out recently too. That's really good and kind of walks through the progression of all of her work. So that's a great resource too. We show it to our clients here, and then just dive in and wrestle with it.
Awesome. If people would like to reach out to you and get more information, I know you are a certified Daring Way facilitator.
Yes.
And you've been, specifically trained in that program. What are some ways that you would like for people to reach out if they do have more questions for you personally?
The best way would probably be my email address at Healing Springs. It's my first name, Kelly, Kelly, dot my last name, Sevin, at healingspringsranch.com.
Okay, I'm going to put that up on the screen here, healingspringsranch.com. Great. So be sure to reach out to Kelly if you have any further questions regarding this. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us about vulnerability, about shame. Hopefully this has been helpful. Let us know if it has. And, these are practical things that you can be using in your conversations with other people, even if it's just simply the statement, I gained something from you today, and just hearing that monologue versus dialogue. And I'm like, I'm going to use that. And
Good.
sharing that with people of how important a dialogue is. And so let us know what your takeaways were here. Kelly, thank you so much again for coming on and being here and sharing your information. I hope we get to see you here again sometime soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Y'all have a great day, and we'll look forward to talking to you and seeing you on the next live. Bye-bye now.